we here in Los Alamos are fortunate to live in an area where most of the time we can see the Milky Way, at least part of it, and especially if you live in White Rock, you might see it a little bit more regularly than we do up here on the hill. But you can go not very far from here and get skies that are as dark as this or even darker. What we're trying to do, and we'll talk a little bit more about this as the evening goes on, is establish a chapter of the International Dark Sky Organization here in New Mexico. Peter and Didier and I and a bunch of other people are working on this, and you'll hear some more about it as we go on later. First, what we're going to do this evening is in just a couple of minutes, I'll turn the show over to Peter Lipscomb, who, as you heard, has been very active in promoting legislation around the state and in creating some dark sky parks around here. And he will present a video that he produced for the International Dark Sky Week, which occurred just a couple of weeks ago. And then after that, Didier will talk more specifically about what's going on here in Los Alamos, what good practices and bad practices are in lighting. So with that, I'm going to stop my screen sharing and turn it over to Peter. Go ahead, Peter.
All right. Hey, thank you, Galen. So as Galen mentioned, the video that I want to share, I produced originally for the International Dark Sky Week 2020, which is an annual observance by a number of organizations. But in this case, it was the International Dark Sky Association who was promoting International Dark Sky Week. And some people, like me, think every week should be International Dark Sky Week. And also, I would say that I believe every day should be International Astronomy Day. But, you know, it's more than just grumpy guys that want to be out in the middle of nowhere in the dark with telescopes. And what I had in mind when I put together my video was trying to create a broader base of interest. There are things about the nighttime environment that people cherish in many different ways. There's no one way or right way to have an appreciation for the nighttime environment. So, you know, I thought, well, okay, what if we reach back through all of human history and look at what the night sky and the nighttime environment, what role that played in people's lives, both as a natural resource and as a cultural resource. So that's what I wanted to share, and that's what is the guiding thought behind the presentation that I created. So I'm going to go ahead and bring this up so I can share the video with you all. Once I get the file set, we'll have it ready to go. Just give me a moment. And I appreciate all of you joining me. And as Galen also mentioned, we are looking for some champions to join our effort in forming a chapter for the International Dark Sky Association here in New Mexico. We are establishing a working group, and we welcome your input. So something to think about as we continue with our program this evening and onward to preserve the sky here in New Mexico. Are we hearing anything?
Yes, it's good now. That's fine.
Hey there. I'm Peter Lipscomb in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Thank you for joining me and checking out this video segment as we celebrate International Dark Sky Week 2020. Whether you nurture a lifelong fascination or just recently developed a passion for the beauty of an increasingly rare and naturally dark night sky, we all share one big sky and the natural and cultural heritage that can be found in the skies of our ancestors. As a natural resource, the night sky is the most ancient of natural beauties. How ancient? Well, words like ancient get tossed around to describe the age of things, and as is often the case with overused adjectives, their true meaning gets diluted and they devolve into hyperbole. Hey, how about that supermoon? So what exactly do I mean when I say ancient? Well, the night sky was visible long before we evolved into the upright bipedal form we know today. It dates back to a time before our ancestors left their tree homes and started using crude tools, even earlier than that, as the land masses of Earth were still separating from one giant supercontinent and diverse life forms were just gaining a toehold. When the side of Earth we're on now was facing away from the sun, those glittery stars and lovely things were already out there. So, billions of years. That's what I mean when I say the most ancient of all natural beauties. As a cultural resource, the night sky has informed and inspired our kind for all the thousands of years of human history. So it's little wonder then that every culture around the world shares stories about the night sky. Some stories explain how things came to be, while others serve as epics of heroism or cautionary tales. Oh, don't do what she did. Look what happened to her. Today, our modern conveniences help us deal with the challenges of the natural environment. But our ancestors had few of these things. The level of connection to the natural world they shared goes beyond anything common today. Now, for some, night is just what happens when the sun goes down. Oh, let's go stream the latest binge-worthy show. But people long ago couldn't be so casual. If they weren't paying attention, whack, they were gone. Our ancestors noticed recurring patterns of movement, cycles of celestial objects, both daytime and nighttime. And from their observations, they developed techniques and strategies to ensure survival. The skies of our ancestors have influenced us in many ways. Let's dive into some examples. The cultural influence of the night sky can be heard in music, seen in the visual arts, found in the alignment of ancient temples and buildings, and read about in literature. It's even in nursery rhymes. It's everywhere. The Pleiades star cluster is a notable example. It spans time and cultures. Alfred Lord Tennyson, in his poem Locksley Hall, wrote, "Many a night I saw the Pleiades rising through a mellow shade, glitter like a swarm of fireflies tangled in a silver braid." Farmers in South America and the North American Southwest used observations of the Pleiades to plan and manage their planting and farming. Potato farmers living on the slopes of the Andes in Bolivia and Peru observed the Pleiades to determine if they should delay planting. If the Pleiades appeared hazy and dim when seen around the festival of San Juan, June 24th, it foretold a drier growing season between October and May, so they held off planting to avoid crop damage. Ancestors of the Zuni Nation in New Mexico called the Pleiades the seed stars. They used the movement of the cluster across the sky to know when to plant and avoid a late frost. As the Pleiades moved steadily westward following winter solstice, they learned to wait before they planted. And when it was no longer visible above the horizon after twilight, warmer nights were ahead and planting could begin. Similar practice was shared among ancestors of the Navajo or Diné people. Their name for the cluster is Diyehe. Don't let Diyehe see you plant, is their old saying. You probably know how to find the North Star using the Big Dipper as a guide. Explorers around the world found their way across uncharted land and water using celestial navigation. Galileo first proposed that the moons of Jupiter could be used as a tool to determine longitude long before John Harrison perfected a seafaring chronograph. Until that time, the Jupiter moon technique was limited to land travelers only. By timing the emergence or occultation of moons as they disappeared or reappeared from behind the planet, Jupiter, one could compare the observed timing to standard timing for Greenwich Mean Time, and by converting the difference in minutes to degrees, a rough estimate of longitude was calculated. Captain James Cook used this method during his voyages to help map the islands he visited in the South Pacific. Even Apollo moon missions used celestial navigation to get to the moon. Because of the limited processing power of their onboard navigation and guidance systems, the Apollo astronauts used a sextant with a reticle to compare their observed location of stars to the computed ones obtained from mission control. And by comparing the difference in angular measure from the two sources, they could make course corrections. This image shows Jim Lovell, commander of Apollo 13, checking the sextant during the successful failure mission in April 1970, 50 years ago. The moon. So far, the only other celestial body in the solar system we have physically visited. Ancient peoples followed the moon cycle carefully, and religious calendars around the world were developed around moon patterns. The Chinese, Hindi, Islamic, Thai, Vietnamese, and Christian calendars, to name a few. Our word month comes from the moon. The moonth. The original meaning of blue moon has ties to the Christian liturgical calendar. With normally 3 full moons each quarter, a fourth would sometimes occur. The fourth moon was called blue moon and was not counted as part of the orderly cycle. Our modern use of the term blue moon now refers to the second full moon in a given month. Today, our studies of the night sky are supported by high-tech installations on remote mountaintops, but it was not always this way. Atop the Fajada Butte in Chaco Canyon in northwestern New Mexico is an ancient site that may have been used as a kind of a shrine. The famous Sun Dagger site has been documented to track solstice and equinox dates of the sun, as illustrated to the right. Other locations in the canyon show careful alignments to the cardinal directions, as demonstrated by the construction of the great houses, like Pueblo Bonito. Many of the great houses and outlier structures throughout the canyon show alignments to not just cardinal directions and the annual solar cycle, but also to the major and minor standstill points of the nearly 19-year lunar cycle. The effort undertaken to create this complex of structures involved many people over generations to complete. One of the most compelling sites in Chaco is the supernova pictograph. Some say it records a supernova event from July 4th, 1054. We know such an event occurred because it was documented by Chinese and Japanese astronomers. When I visited the site some years ago, I could see that whatever the purpose of the panel, it was placed in a location that was meant to avoid exposure to the elements. Almost 20 feet high, on the underside of a rock overhang along the south wall of the canyon, is where the markings are found. The direction I'm facing is toward the northeast. If I were here almost 1,000 years ago, when the supernova first became visible in the pre-dawn sky, I would have been looking the right direction. Other notable sites in the southwest include the star ceilings of the Four Corners region at places like Canyon de Chelly. What was their purpose? A Navajo guide to the canyon suggested a possible and very logical explanation. Just as the stars keep the sky up, the star ceilings keep the rock from falling. Star ceilings don't represent actual constellations and patterns, but are more symbolic and ceremonial in nature. While ancestors of plebeian cultures followed major and minor standstill movements of the moon and sun, Navajo cosmology developed to encompass the entire night sky. Tracking the seasons was based on the changing appearance of the sky overall. Myths, ceremonial practice, and ritual are based upon their own set of star patterns and the spirits and characters found within. In sub-Saharan Africa, a Neolithic stone site on the Nabta Playa is believed to have been used by cattle herders to know when to bring their animals to graze the fresh grasses during monsoon season. The Namibian desert is dry today, but thousands of years ago, it was a wetter place. The large stone in the image to the left points to the summer solstice position of the sun. The later part of June is when the monsoon rains would arrive. Another example of techniques that our ancestors used. to ensure their survival. In Mexico and Central America, Mayan sites demonstrate a sophisticated knowledge of celestial patterns. At Chichen Itza, an observatory called El Caracol, meaning the snail, has a spiral stairway that winds past small slits in its walls to observe different celestial phenomena. A major design feature of this structure was centered on the planet Venus as it moved through its 584-day cycle. 5 of those cycles equal 8 Earth years. So Mayan astronomers worked out it would take that much time for Venus to shift from its northernmost to its southernmost positions along the horizon. Another amazing Mayan structure at Chichen Itza is El Castillo. During the equinox dates, shadows cast by the pyramid corners are cast against the stairway balustrade, creating a serpent's body. The next time you find yourself out under a star-filled night sky, remember our ancestors, the careful attention they paid to the natural world and the movement of celestial objects. Through those observations, they developed techniques to ensure their survival. Think about that for a minute. Without their success, few of us would even be here. Thanks to the IDA for inviting me to present during International Dark Sky Week, and thank you for joining me as we explored the sky of our ancestors. Remember, practice safe and sensible lighting techniques. Don't cast light above a horizontal plane. Keep it down on the ground where it's useful. Match the light to the need and only light as much as needed. And turn it off when you're done. I mean, really, who amongst us can waste money on electricity bills these days? You can save money, conserve natural resources, and be rewarded by a view of the sky of our ancestors. That is a winning combination. Get active with night sky preservation in any way you can and help protect and preserve the aesthetic, cultural, and scientific value of the night sky for generations to come. Okay, so that kind of is a quick survey of only a few examples of what our ancestors were up to related to the night sky and the nighttime environment and the techniques they developed to ensure their survival. So here we are today with this new creation of technology. Well, okay, 130 plus years old, but we're using it quite a lot. And it is affecting things not just in the natural environment, but also related to our human health. So saving money, reducing draw on natural resources, and those other reasons are one of the things that we think about as we create the effort behind the working group and establishing a chapter here in New Mexico.
Okay, great, Peter. Thank you very much.
Okay, so the theme tonight, good evening, everybody. Thanks for coming to our virtual meeting. And the theme is light pollution, and several aspects have already been discussed by Galen and Peter. And in my presentation, I'll dive a little more in some of the technical aspects and what the issues are, but we'll focus mostly on the situation in New Mexico, in particular in the county of Los Alamos and the surrounding area. So as Galen mentioned, a group of us got a group of organizations and individuals in the area has gotten together to try to tackle the issue of light pollution and controlling outdoor lighting in Los Alamos County to preserve the dark skies and also enjoy the other benefits that come with such action. So Peter's presentation covered the importance of the night sky to ancient civilizations and how it was part of their survival toolkit to know when it was the right time to plant and when some major rivers would flood and so forth. But it was also part of their cultures. It was ingrained in the stories they passed on from generation to generation. And one thing that all these cultures that span the earth and time, history, that they had in common is that they didn't have to deal with artificial light. So they all enjoy pristine dark skies, which makes some of us rather jealous, actually. But if you've seen the night sky from a remote area where it is very dark, you understand how beautiful it is, and it's a powerful spiritual impact on people. So it's no surprise that the night sky was an integral part of these people's lives and cultures. Now, things have changed quite a bit since then with the advent of artificial lighting about 130 some years ago. And we can see the result of all this in this picture here, which is a mosaic of the Earth photographed at night by orbiting satellite. And you can see that most major cities and countries are brightly lit, and actually what we see is the light that goes up upward in the sky towards those satellites. It turns out that the amount of light that goes upward like this correlate rather strongly with the population density and also with economic development. You can see very well here Japan, Europe, and North America. And particularly in the United States, the eastern half of the country has a larger population and is affected by light pollution rather significantly. But on the western part of the country, there are still large areas that enjoy dark skies, but these are all, of course, very remote and unpopulated areas. So the night sky, as Peter pointed out, is an endangered cultural resource. And I would like to quote a text from Henry Beston from the book, The Outermost House. And he wrote this at a time where he was living in a beach house in Cape Cod. And he says, "Our fantastic civilization has fallen out of touch with many aspects of nature, and with none more completely than with night. With lights and ever more lights, we drive the holiness and the beauty of night back to the forests and the sea. Today's civilization is full of people who have not the slightest notion of the character of the poetry of night, who have never even seen night." So this sounds very contemporary, but actually it was written in 1928, so 90 years ago. So you can imagine that the situation has gotten quite a bit worse since then. And as a matter of fact, 80% of Americans live in parts of the country where you cannot see the Milky Way at night. So most of us can't see the Milky Way at night from their homes. And that's very sad. It also leads people to be completely unaware of the sky, because the sky above them at night is rather dull. There's very little to see except for the moon and a few bright planets. And so it is really not part of their lives. It's some kind of abstract thing that you hear about in NOVA specials, or that you see beautiful pictures from observatories and the Hubble Space Telescope. But this all seems very remote, and that's very different from the experiences of people just a couple of centuries ago. And so the night sky really is an endangered cultural resource, and I think that losing the night sky is a great loss for mankind. So what is the situation in New Mexico? So light pollution is defined as the excessive, misdirected, or obtrusive artificial outdoor lighting. And this results in spilling of light where it is not needed. And here we have a map of light brightness or light pollution of New Mexico, and you can recognize the major urban areas, in particular Albuquerque here, Santa Fe, and the once secret city, Los Alamos, is clearly visible on such a map and is visible from outer space. Fortunately, New Mexico still has areas of pristine dark skies. These are shown by the dark areas here. And of course, there's the most remote parts of the state, but this is the Gila wilderness area. And this is the northeastern part of the state. This is the town of Raton. But more than half of the state is still quite dark, as you can see with the medium gray color here. So we're quite fortunate in the state that we have not lost this cultural resource entirely, and that something can be done about preserving what we have. So this light that goes up that we saw in the previous images actually comes from this. This is a picture that I took from an airplane over an urban area. And every little dot of light that makes up this image here is a street light or a parking lot light that emits light upwards towards the airplane up in the sky and for no purpose whatsoever. And across the United States, this represents a significant waste of energy. About 30% of all the light, artificial light used at night, goes upward in the sky. And this corresponds to about $3 billion a year of wasted electricity. And in other measures of this is it amounts to 21 million tons per year of carbon emissions in the atmosphere, and which is the equivalent of 4 million cars driven throughout the year in the United States. So that is not small potatoes. So the view from the ground from this can be seen in this panorama. These are pictures that I took from Overlook Park in White Rock. And we can see here on the right, looking west, we can see domes of light above the Llano, the lab, and the town of Los Alamos. Here we have Albuquerque that had a couple of clouds above it, and you can see how bright the lights from Albuquerque are reflected by the clouds. Here's Santa Fe with dome of light in Espanola. So this dome of light is actually the light that goes up in the sky, scattered by the molecules in the air and also the dust in suspension and all that, and creates this sort of dome or half hemisphere of glowing air. And this goes to hide stars in those regions of the sky. To better appreciate how much light actually goes up, I went back and did the same exercise here, and on a cloudy night. So we have the same panorama, and you can very well see all the clouds here that were there. And the clouds have an orange tint, and that's basically because they're reflecting the light sent upward by the street lights that have an orange tint, most of them, and then it's reflected back down. So you can see that there is such light pretty much all over the sky, even if you don't see it on a clear sky like this. The clouds are witnesses to this wasted light that goes up into the sky. In particular, here you can see Santa Fe area is really, really bright. So the problem is pervasive, even in a small town around a small town like Los Alamos, which is somewhat isolated. So the principles of good outdoor lighting were mentioned by Peter at the end of his presentation, and I'll go into the details of these in the next few slides. But basically, you should use light only if it is needed, and also the light needs to be controlled and basically directed so it falls only where it is needed and not spill all over the place, or even, God forbid, up towards the sky where it serves no purpose. Also, light should be used only when it is needed. There are times where there's no activity and where it's not necessary to have some areas lighted. Very important also is to control the brightness of the light. It should be at the level that's suitable for its particular application. There's no purpose served by having overly bright night lights. And another important issue that has come up in the last few years is the sources of blue light, and these should be minimized and eliminated as much as possible, although there are some circumstances where some amount of blue light or white light is desirable for color perception at night. So poor outdoor lighting has numerous adverse impacts. I've mentioned a few already, but one of them is that it is less safe. People do feel more safe when there's more light at night, but in practice, it is less safe, in particular because it causes reduced visibility between the poorly lit areas. And poorly lit, I mean by poor design. That doesn't mean necessarily dim, but the transition with areas that are not lit. So the light-dark transitions in the poorly designed lighting system reduces visibility. It can also cause visual confusion in dense urban areas where you have not only the artificial lighting, but the traffic signs and traffic lights and business signs and so forth. This is not so much a problem in Los Alamos because we're in a small town. Also, poorly designed lighting creates strong shadows of trees and walls and structures in which bad actors can hide. So you're not really more safe in a poorly designed system. In the past decade, a growing body of research has shown that the lighting environment at night affects human health and also wildlife and the environment. And this has been summarized in 2016 by a report by the American Medical Association entitled Human and Environmental Effects of LED Community Lighting. They focused on LED lights, which are becoming more and more prevalent in our outdoor lighting and even indoors. And they conclude by making a very strong recommendation to reduce LED glare and also the blue light component that comes from LEDs. And another fact about poor outdoor lighting is that it's just plain ugly. And here's an example of an ugly design. So here's a building in central Los Alamos, and up on the second floor here, there's a wall pack light like this one here that is intended to lighting the parking lot, but also causes a lot of glare. It shines directly in the eyes of the people in the parking lot and shines in all directions, including above. And this light is so bright that it even creates a reflection inside the camera. You can contrast this with the lights that are lighting the footpath at the bottom of the wall here, and these are recessed into a ceiling area, and you can't see the light directly, so it causes no glare, and you have soft lighting over the area. Now, the good outdoor lighting, of course, has benefits, and they tend to be the opposite of the drawbacks of poor outdoor lighting, but I'll emphasize a couple. It is a fact that a good lighting design makes a town or an area much more pleasant and welcoming at night. And you can see this in some relatively recently designed parks and central urban areas where it's been well done. And it is, the lighting design is part of the landscape, the landscaping and the trees and the buildings and so forth. All of this can be done in a harmonious way, and they enhance each other. Poor lighting design just makes everything look ugly at night, no matter how pretty it can be during the day. Also, good outdoor lighting leads to increased safety for motorists, cyclists, and pedestrians at night. And an important aspect, especially in Los Alamos, who's trying to attract more tourists in the county, and is that good lighting is also more attractive to tourists. First, the town looks better, so it's more pleasant, but also there's a component of tourism called astronomy tourism. This is a real thing. And actually, throughout the world, in very dark areas, there are astronomy lodges, which are effectively astronomy B&Bs. You go there, you stay overnight, and you can use the telescopes that they have, or they can give you a tour of the night sky. And so this is a growing segment of tourism, and particularly in New Mexico. New Mexico True is an organization that promotes tourism in New Mexico, and there are, of course, many aspects of tourism in our state, and one of them, and that's emphasized by New Mexico True, is its dark skies. So come to New Mexico, enjoy our dark skies. They have a nice webpage that shows where you can find a good dark skies in New Mexico, and also educational programs. And close to us, the Valles Caldera is developing a strong astronomy program for the public and the visitors in the preserve. And also they're applying for a dark sky preserve status from IDA, the International Dark Sky Association. So our neighbors to the west are making an effort to control light pollution and to enhance the astronomy component in our neighborhood, and it would be good for us to help them along that way, and that might help bring more tourism to Los Alamos. An important aspect of light pollution or outdoor lighting in general is what's called the LED revolution. So as you have noticed, when you go to the hardware store to buy light bulbs, you can see that the older bulbs, the incandescent and even the compact fluorescent, are gradually being phased out in favor of LED lighting. And the reason for this is that they have a great advantage, is that they're extremely efficient and they use very little electricity for the same amount of light. They also have a very long life, which results over time in considerable cost savings in operation. They're also rather flexible in terms of designing the luminaire or the light itself and the light pattern around it. So the engineers who design these things now have a lot of flexibility for different kinds of applications. So that's very interesting. Something that couldn't be done before with standard light sources. Another advantage is they can be turned on or off instantly, and they can also be dimmed. So this is a new capability in outdoor lighting technology, and that can be applied, for example, in reducing the amount of light that we use when there's very little traffic on our streets, for example, on our roads, for example. Now, like most new technologies, the advantages come also with some disadvantages. And the LED revolution has proved to be, or turned to be, problematic for light pollution, because the low operation cost has very often led to overlighting of streets and parking lots and buildings and so forth, because you can pour out much more light than before, and it still costs you less than you used to pay. So that is something that needs to be paid very close attention to. Most of the LEDs that are installed are of a cool white color, and this is quantified by something called the color temperature, around 5,000 degrees for those cool white LEDs. And this is also problematic because it creates an unpleasant and harsh light, and the blue component of it is most deleterious to human health, also to wildlife, and to the night sky. And you're already familiar with this because when the first LEDs came on the market in hardware stores for indoor lighting, for example, people were reluctant to use them because of this harsh light that they would have in their house that was so different from what they would get from incandescent lighting, for example, that has a much more warm feel to it. And of course, manufacturers went to work at this, and now of course you can find on the market LEDs that have temperatures well below 5,000 degrees. 3,000 and 2,700 are quite common, and those numbers are listed on the packaging of the LEDs. And now people are adopting LEDs of cool temperatures and warmer color, somewhat paradoxically, and because you know, they're satisfactory for use in the house and they provide a pleasant environment. I'll go over this a bit quickly. So what we have here are a spectra of different kinds of light sources. So here's our cool white LED, and we've spread the white light into its individual components of colors from purple to deep red. And such a white LED emits all colors from, you know, between purple and blue all the way to the red. And you can compare this with a standard street light, which have a yellow-orange color. These are known as high-pressure sodium lights, which emit most of the light in the yellow and red, and a little bit discrete colors here in the green, sorry. So here we have a chart of LEDs of different kinds, and here's our white LED color here. And stacked on top of it, we have spectra of LEDs of cooler color temperature. And as you can see, when we go to 3000 degrees or even 2200 degrees, the blue part of the spectrum here goes away. So these are gradually yellower in color and more pleasant. And for any outdoor lighting application, it's recommended not to use anything above 3000 degrees, but still these get a grade of C from the International Dark Sky Association. What you can do, however, is use the latest technology in LEDs or have amber color, and there's phosphor converted and also a so-called narrow band amber. And you can see that they emit even much less of the blue and even some of the green. And this narrow band, it focuses or emits mostly around the yellow part of the spectrum. So this has a deep orange color. So the technology exists to control the color of the LEDs also. And so these should be avoided as much as possible to the preference of the cooler LEDs or even these amber. So let's look at the situation now in Los Alamos. So this is a picture I took of downtown Los Alamos from Camp May Road. And so we're about 600 or 700 feet above downtown. And there are a few things I'd like to point out. First, there's plenty of lights here that shine upward above the horizontal. And I'd like to bring your attention to this area here. So this is the security portal of the lab. And so this is the truck route here, and these are the security shacks. And you can see that it has yellow colors. It's because they're using these high pressure sodium lights. And there are no lights shining upward here. What you see are these little vertical streaks. These are actually the light poles. So you do not see the actual lamp because all the light is set below the horizontal. So this is a pretty good design, although it is somewhat bright. Here we have a string of lights. This is the Omega Bridge, and it has lights on both sides of the road. So some of them are facing towards the camera and some are facing away. And you can see that those are facing away. They're staggered here. You can only see the light that they cast on the road. So this is actually excellent shielding away from the road and very good shielding towards the road here, but you can still see the light, but they're not too bright. Now, the brightest spot downtown is the Smith store. And this is a recent project, just a few years ago. And while it does not have lights that actually shine straight up, so in the strict sense, it follows some of the recommendations for preserving the night sky and emitting light pollution, turns out that the lights in the parking lot and the lights illuminating the front of the building are so bright that this building here has become a major contributor to light pollution, or major source of light pollution in downtown Los Alamos, which is unfortunate. So here's another example of poor outdoor lighting. This is a Chamisa Elementary School in White Rock. And so it has all around the school and the walls, it has these features, these light fixtures called wall packs. And you can see just by the design that it sends light down, also horizontally, and also it can send light up, and it certainly does. And you can see here that they cause a lot of glare. Basically, the light shines right into your eyes, which decreases your ability to see well at night. And you can see also that there are strong shadows between the lights. So these lights are unshielded, and that is problematic. If you look across the street from the school, so in the foreground on this picture here is the school grounds, is the parking lot, and this is the meadow lane. And you can see that those houses, their front yards and also their windows are brightly lit by the school lights that we saw in the previous picture. This is known as light trespass. Basically, when your neighbor has a light that not only shines in their yard and their property, but shines brightly on yours or into your bedroom, for example. So this is something that is to be avoided. And also the color of the light here is this cool white LED that is also to be avoided. Now, because it's hard to take a picture that at night that shows what you actually see with your naked eye, I took a reference image. So I walked down a couple of blocks on Meadow Lane away from the school lights and took a picture with the same camera settings as this image here. and you can see that you can barely see some light filtering through the windows of those houses, but you can't see anything else. So that is just to illustrate the contrast. Not that it is that dark here, but it shows the contrast between overlighting by a large amount and a typical neighborhood in White Rock. There are also good examples of outdoor lighting in Los Alamos. One that I like is the new county building, and this is the main entrance, and there is no glare because the lights are in this high ceiling area here, and they're recessed, and the area is lit fairly uniformly, and so it is pleasant, and it is somewhat bright, but it doesn't light up into the sky because the lights are all shining downward. This is the view from Central Avenue, and again, there is no glare. The light that have been installed are well shielded and also enhance the architecture of the building, and this is a street light. So another good example is the Peak building, where we would be tonight were it not for the pandemic. And when the building is closed at night, Peak is all dark except for 2 lights near the main entrance. The parking lot and all the surroundings of the buildings are not lit at all, which is of course consistent with Peak's mission for environmental education. So they're protecting all the critters that live around the building that can be observed by the public during the day. So in Los Alamos County, there's a mix of old, new, and very good and also very bad lights, both street and building lights. And, but there is a comprehensive lighting ordinance that was enacted about 15 years ago. And, but it appears that the ordinance is not enforced or not uniformly, as we saw, for example, in the recent building of the Smith Center and in downtown Los Alamos. And so light pollution has been steadily increasing in the county in spite of this ordinance. But there is a new hope. As Galen and Peter have mentioned, there's a broad interest in sound outdoor lighting in the Los Alamos County area. And a group, several organizations, shown here, like Peak and the Pajarito Astronomers and Valles Caldera and the village of Jemez Springs and several individuals have formed a coalition that we've called the Jemez Mountains Night Sky Coalition. And our goal is to help control light pollution in the Los Alamos County and the surrounding area to improve the experience of the public when they're looking at the night sky, and also promote some aspect of tourism in the area. So so far what we've gotten together and had a number of discussions. This talk is sort of a part of our effort to do this and make the local residents aware of what we're doing and what the issues are. And so we have written a document that presents these issues and propose some action for the county governance, and we'll be presenting this as soon as we can when things return somewhat more to normal. And so we're not starting from scratch. There are lots of resources available now to do this well. Galen and Peter have mentioned the International Dark Sky Association, which is essentially a clearinghouse for all things about outdoor lighting. And they're a tremendous organization, and they've been around for about 40 years, and they're very helpful, including providing sample ordinances. So we have a basic template to start from, in addition to the ordinance that the county already has. There's also a professional society, the Illuminating Engineering Society. These are the engineers who designs those lights and establish the lighting standards for different settings, such as roads, different levels of traffic, parking lots, sports fields, and so forth. There are also several cities with very successful enactment of comprehensive lighting ordinances. In particular, Flagstaff and Tucson are been pioneers in this area. And there have also been some major retrofits projects of street lights in Tucson, Phoenix, and Albuquerque, experience that we can draw from in our own effort locally. So this lighting ordinances are not new, and there are several of them in the state. Almost 20 years ago, the state passed the Night Sky Protection Act, and over 20 counties and municipalities in the state has some form of lighting ordinance. And so do we in Los Alamos, and here's the preamble of it. And but it apparently is not enforced, certainly not in a uniform fashion, and the results have been mixed. And it definitely needs to be updated for LED technology, because it was written before that came onto the scene. So what we'll be requesting is this in the short term, and this is costs nothing basically, except the will to take action, is to enforce the existing ordinance, and to install from now on only LED lights of temperature of 3,000 degrees or less, or even better, the later technology of amber LEDs, and install only fully shielded lights. In the medium term, the ordinance needs to be updated to reflect the LED technology. And as the county needs to replace the aging street lights and sports field lights as they fall out of order, they need to replace them with fully shielded fixtures as needed. In the longer term, ideally, there'd be a county-wide project to retrofit all the existing streetlights, get rid of the really old, awful stuff, and install well-designed fixtures that meet modern standards. But that would actually be costly. So this is my last slide. Gone a little bit over the hour. So where we are now is that, you know, New Mexico still has plenty of dark sites. They're rather remote, so you have to go far to find them, but we can still enjoy dark skies, which is a draw for tourism and also astronomers, amateurs and professionals to our state. Light pollution in Los Alamos County is presently moderate and therefore is manageable. We can preserve what we have and improve on it and get to a very good place. The fact that in White Rock, people can see the Milky Way from their backyards on any given night is quite a blessing, in my opinion, and it's something we should definitely preserve. And so we have an existing ordinance to build upon. And we have, for the first time, I think, in the county, a critical mass of stakeholders that are involved in this effort. So what's left to do now is the hard part, really, is to convince the county governance to take action on this. So thank you very much for your attention. And if we have time for questions, I'll be happy to take them.
Okay, great. Thank you, Didier. We do have time for just a few questions. I have one I would like to, that came up that I'd like to ask you right away. And then the others we can talk about perhaps after Galen has given his little summary. We only just have a few minutes left for Galen to do a little summary, and then we'll just take the rest of the questions. So one question is, how much would a full retrofit of the Los Alamos County street lighting cost? Any thoughts?
I don't know. We haven't looked into these numbers yet. And we actually, that's something we need to talk to county staff, like the county engineer. How much does a street light cost? And it's not just the light. In some cases, it's the pole. In White Rock, we have some rather odd looking lights that I've never seen anywhere else that are probably original from when White Rock was built. And so one would need new poles also. So there's a cost of that and installation. So that's something that needs to be talked about with the county, because they also know how many streetlights they have. But I don't have a good answer to that question. I don't have a number. However, that's the kind of project that would be spread, of course, over several years, and therefore the annual cost on the budget would be minimized that way.
I can interrupt for just a second. We actually had a meeting scheduled for the end of March with the county manager, Harry Burgess, which was postponed, obviously, because of the coronavirus epidemic, and we don't know when that will be rescheduled. So.
Okay, we do have a few more questions, but Galen, would you like to summarize first before we tackle the rest of the questions?
Yes, I will. let's see, where is the, right. So this is what we're looking at right here. Can anybody see this now? And this is the front page of the website of the International Dark Sky Association, which I would invite everybody to go have a look at. And there's a button up here that says support IDA. There's a button down here that says how you can help, and lots of information on this website where you can go to help. But as we said at the beginning, and was mentioned by both Peter and Didier, is that we're forming a New Mexico chapter, a statewide chapter of the International Dark Sky Association. And so this, Didier mentioned the Jemez Mountains Night Sky Coalition, which we've had a couple of meetings of, and that will be, sort of part of the New Mexico chapter of this. We are looking for helpers. We are looking for people to help us put this together. And so if you are interested in helping us, email us, and our emails are listed on this slide. And the other thing to do is to visit the Dark Sky Organization's website and join it. With that, I think that concludes all that I want to say. And apart from thanking very much Peter Lipscomb and Didier Saumon for their efforts in putting this little show together, and we look forward to working with each other and with any of the rest of you who want to help us in this project. Yeah, just keep in touch with all of us, and let's get this job done.
Fantastic, thank you guys. And we had several people who really said that was a great presentation for all of these sections. So thank you very much. We do have a couple of questions. One in particular, several people are asking the same question in slightly different ways. And it's basically, are there a few things, in addition to what you've described about joining your organizations, are there a few things that a regular person can do to reduce light pollution, like not having your lights on at night outside or things like that? What could just a normal homeowner do that could help in this way? Some thoughts? Okay, Peter.
Well, if you did your own little personal lighting inventory around the house, one of the things I think to start with, of course, would be outside, because, if it gets to the point where you're going to want to talk to neighbors, it's always good to have your side of the street clean first. Yes. So get outside and step back a little ways. See what you notice as far as the light that's already there. Are you able to see the source of the light or only the effect? Now, if you can see the source of the light, you're creating a potential glare or light trespass situation. Think about those wall packs on the school wall building, that kind of thing. Look at that and take care of that. Inside, I think, people will buy things that end up overlighting a situation. Well, it could be for inside or outside. Learn lumens. Lumens is a way that, I was raised up to look for wattage. That's how I bought my lights. It was all about wattage. But now with lumens, you can see what the equivalent is for the wattage. That's the power consumption. So get something that's close to what you already have by comparing the lumens. Shield the light so you can see the effect, not the source. Make sure it's pointed downward, not up into the sky. Install motion detectors. That's been somewhat problematic with some of the technology because the bushes blow from the wind and it turns the light on. So it does require a little more attention tuning the activator. But doing a personal lighting inventory is a good place to start. And then, how do we talk to the neighbors if they got a light? Remember, it's about the light. It's not about the person. The lights are bad. So don't put them on the defensive, so that they think they're bad and you guys are enemies. Invite them over, maybe in an evening, and, look at their house across the way. And if there's anything interesting about that, maybe there's a light that's been bothering you. Maybe you've got enough of a relationship already, having a few chats, then broach the subject. Don't do it right away. They may be on the defensive and they think you're saying they're bad people. But keep it so it's on the light, not about the people. It's about us living together with better lighting choices.
That's great. Actually, let me just share a couple things about my house that we just did recently. As our incandescent lights burn out, which you can't really see from the house behind me, but in the other house, as the incandescent ones burn out, we're replacing them with LEDs. And at first, we had a lot of really bright LEDs, and we're now beginning to switch those over to the 2700K more yellowish LEDs, which my wife much prefers. Outside, we had a couple of fixtures that were almost completely covering the light, but not quite. And we just replaced those with ones that really shade the light and send it straight down. And we've replaced the outside bulbs so that they're the 2700K. So that's something that we have just done personally. We also do have a security light on a motion sensor. We found that the biggest problem we have are moths will turn it on. But other than that, we've really spent a lot of time trying to adjust the lights so that when they do come on, they just shine where they need to around the doorways or access points and not just all over the property. So from our personal perspective, that's a few things we've done. Anybody else want to chime in on this point?
Yeah, I'd like to add that on the IDA, the International Dark Sky Association website, they also list a large number of night sky friendly lighting fixtures, and you can see which companies are making what, and you can go and buy them. So because if you go to your local hardware store, to Lowe's or to Metzger's, you're not they have some but very few good outdoor lights that are shielded. And so if you go to the IDA website, they'll have plenty of examples. All the technology is out there. There are very good fixtures, so you can think about replacing some of the ones that you have that may be not optimal by shining all over the place onto your neighbors or up into the sky. So the IDA website has a good selection of those.
Yeah, that's a great point. I want to just dovetail a little bit on something that came up, but I wondered if there's more questions before I share any more.
Yeah, we do have a couple questions. One, I'm not sure how to answer, but I mean, I've got a thought. One is, how do we convince Smiths to follow the ordinance? I was thinking, well, we could boycott buying toilet paper and cleaning products, but I don't think that's going to work very well. So that may have to wait until we talk to the county, but does anyone have any ideas there? I don't know if anyone's actually talked to Smiths, but I mean, I'm sure they leave their lights on indoors for security reasons, and they have a huge glass, windows all along the front of the store, and they light their parking lot very well. Any thoughts on that?
I don't know. The problem is that the parking lot is large and it's too bright. I've been there, and it's definitely much brighter than it would need to be. One could quantify this by measuring it and comparing it with standards from the Illumination Engineering Society. But so the fact that it's already built causes some kind of resistance of spending more money to replace the lights with dimmer lights. So you have to convince them to spend the money to do that. So that's always harder than getting in at ground zero before a project is done and get our input, into a reasonable lighting design before they build it. And then, there's no additional expense of retrofitting. So maybe we'll need to, once the county has bought into our idea and wants to do something about this, maybe the county can talk to Smiths. I'm not sure that if I go talk to the manager at Smiths myself, that pay much attention to what I have to say.
Good point. Okay.
So maybe if we have the county behind us, then something could be done.
Right. Let me try one more question. Why is blue light worse than red? And since you brought it up, Didier, do you want to start on that one?
Yes. I also want to make a parallel between what I said about blue lights of LEDs, and I'm sure most of you have read I've seen in the media that our devices, our smartphones and iPads and all that, They recommend that you don't use this just before going to bed because they emit blue light that affects your circadian circles and you won't sleep as well. And now, you know, these devices now have options to have the screen turn to an amber or red color at night. They have a night mode. And so it's exactly the same issue. Blue light is worse for the light pollution because it scatters more in the atmosphere. So red light will tend to stream through the air, but blue light will tend to scatter and create those domes of light that I showed on the pictures. So in terms of light pollution, blue is worse for that reason. As for the biological effects of the blue light, I'm not sure what the cause is, but it's certainly on an empirical basis, it's well established that a blue light is more disturbing at night. Also, it makes it look more like daylight. I mean, the sun is a light source that has a temperature of about 5,800 degrees. And that's what we consider white light. And then our LEDs are about 5,000. So we have these LEDs that are like sunlight almost. And that apparently is not good for wildlife, insects and birds and other critters that live at night, and is not good for our own biology. But why it is, I don't know the biological reason.
Okay, it's almost 8:20, so I think we should probably cut things off in a moment. I would like to ask one last question that just came up. Didier mentioned getting in before a project is built to have them try to design the right light. Clearly, having a lighting ordinance that's actually enforced is one way to do that. But the question that Kana asked is there any way to find out about lighting that's about to be built before they start construction or installing it?
Well, usually the county has a public consultation on building projects. Which is why it takes forever to build anything in Los Alamos. And so that's one way to get in. A few years ago, well, maybe it started about 10 years ago, there was a White Rock development project. The county decided to invest some money in White Rock. So they redid New Mexico 4 through White Rock, and they rebuilt the library, and they created the visitor center and so forth. And I knew somebody who was on that committee, and I was able to make a presentation and talk to them. And I had some amount of input at the time on the lighting aspect of some of these projects, which has come out. In some cases, I thought was pretty good, and some not so good. But I'm not a lighting engineer. I don't do the designs. I can't do that. I mean, I could learn some of it. But at some point, you have to let the people do their work and hope it comes out right after you discuss the issues. But
okay, great. Well, thank you all again, Galen, Didier, and Peter, for a very informative discussion. And for those of you who know friends who would like to have seen this and didn't have an opportunity tonight to tune in, I know that everybody has so many things that they're doing right now. That some people may have missed out. And so we did record this, and we will try to put it up on the Peak website. Probably take a week or so for that to come up, but you could refer your friends to the Peak website if they might be interested in that. So thank you again to everybody for a great set of talks.
Good night,
Thanks
everyone.
for moderating. Thanks, Didier. Thanks, Peter. We'll see you all sometime soon, hope.
Have a great weekend, everybody.